I want to just start by acknowledging you all for having got in here first thing this morning after the party last night. So please give yourself a big round of applause for being here, first of all. The second thing is you might have noticed that many of the speakers on stage are not speakers. They're CEOs, they're VCs, they're people who have something to share, and I want to share with you, I also am not a speaker, I am an entrepreneur. First time I was ever on stage was 2002, so we're going back like 17 years. And I do the same thing every good entrepreneur does. If you don't know how to do something, go find an expert and ask them for a tip. So 2002, I just created the wealth dynamic system, which we're using in Singapore for entrepreneurs. And I had one of my friends who said, Roger, this is great. This shows entrepreneurs exactly what they need to do, how they go about building a team. I want you to share this with my team. And I thought maybe he's got 3 or 4 people. I go, sure, yeah, I'm happy to do that. He goes, great. We've got this conference center. It's going to be in 2 weeks' time. I said, what do you mean a conference center? He goes, I've got 3,000 people. I've got an insurance company. I've got 3,000 agents. I go, I had no idea. And he goes, yeah. So anyway, we've got the stage. You can come on board and then talk for 15 minutes. And I was so nervous. I was like, what? I've got to get on stage? 3,000 people? So I did what you would expect was go find an expert. I knew someone at the time. His name was Scott Friedman, who was the president of the National Speakers Association of America. He was based in Colorado. So I phoned him up. I go, Scott, hello, can you help me? And he goes, hey, who is this? I said, it's Roger from Singapore. He goes, oh, Roger, hey, how's it going? And I go, not so good. He goes, why? I said, because I'm going to do this talk on stage. He goes, really? Well, that's really good. I'm going to say congratulations. I go, no, I'm really nervous. Okay, can you please give me some tips? And he says this. He says, Roger, a tip I sometimes give speakers is if a speaker has a strange accent, the first thing they should do before they do anything else is to explain their accent, because if they don't, no one's listening to anything they're saying because they're still thinking about their accent. So I will start by telling you why I have a strange accent. Okay, the reason is because my mother is from China. My mother's from China, and my father is from Scotland. And of course, if you had a Chinese mother and you had a Scottish father, that would make you confused. So I have gone through my whole life by accident having the one thing we all need as entrepreneurs, which is perspective. Like when I go to Europe, people think I'm from somewhere in Asia, and when I come here to Asia, people think maybe I'm from like America or from Europe somewhere, and when I go down to New Zealand or Australia, they think I'm actually from somewhere in Europe, and when I go to America, they think that I'm probably from South Africa. Wherever I go, they actually think I'm from somewhere else. And what happens when you look at things from a place where you're not, like that's perspective. Every one of you being in this room is perspective. It's like, you're on the football pitch and you're not winning the game, or you're not winning as well as you want to, and you get off the pitch, and it's actually at the half time when you're not even on the pitch, you actually get to see what you're doing and realize, you know what, where I was and where I want to go is quite different. And that's what I'm going to be talking about this morning, which is what's going to be different in the next 10 years. But actually just even being at a point where you're taking that time out, maybe it's like last night, you had some big brainwave. Maybe it's going to be sometime today when you're thinking differently about what's happening within your business, you realize there's a whole different way. Maybe you're challenged with a problem right now. You have one conversation with one person who's been through that challenge, and they just say, hey, why don't you just go do this? And that one comment becomes more valuable than the last 3 months of management meetings trying to figure this thing out. So perspective is the number one thing, which is looking at things from a place where you're not. And so I just want to acknowledge all of you for just being in this room, not just yesterday, but today, listening to all these amazing speakers and really be thinking for not just yourself, but all of your team, all of your investee companies, if you happen to be an investor, all of your customers, because the ripple effect of these 2 days and what Catcher has done here and Wild Digital is going to impact not just the hundreds in this room, but actually the millions all over Southeast Asia as well. So I just want to, again, acknowledge you, and please give yourself a big round of applause just for being here. Thank you very much. And I'd like to get us some perspective. If we're going to talk about the next 10 years, I want us to get a bit of perspective about the past. Like, just think back even a year. What were you doing a year ago? This is where I was a year ago. This is where I was, and this is who I was with. This is my Chinese mother and my Scottish father. Here we are. Yeah. This is how we like to dress at home. I'm only kidding. Has anyone seen the movie Kill Bill? Seen the Kill Bill movie? Yeah. So Tarantino movie. This was in the Kill Bill restaurant in Tokyo. My story today is going to be about Tokyo. It's going to be about Japan. The G20 summit that just happened, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, which is going to happen next year, and something called Society 5.0, which is the Japanese government's concept of what's going to happen over the next 10 years for all of us as a humanity. And so here we were, and we were celebrating my 50th birthday, because I just turned 50 years old, and we had a whole group of entrepreneurs from all over. This wasn't just a fancy dress. This was actually a samurai outfit, which was from a 7th-generation samurai. You can actually see him down here. He is, where is he? Over here. He's not actually even dressed in his normal samurai outfit because I'm wearing it. And we all brought in entrepreneurs from around the world to get connected up. We were there for about a week. We had this big birthday party for me, and then we went and had some amazing experiences. And I want to start with this one experience because we're so busy rushing from thing to thing. This one experience we had, which was an entire morning just to have a cup of tea. We went for a tea ceremony, and it was in the middle of a bonsai garden. And I didn't realize this, but obviously samurai code, the Bushido code, is not just applied to swordsmanship. It's applied in all areas of life. So the tea maker was a 7th black belt tea maker in the samurai code. And so here she is, and she is actually giving tea to my mother, because she was the oldest in the group. And she took so long to just go through all the detail, to just turn all the rituals. We're entrepreneurs. We want to do things fast. We want to make things happen yesterday. And we're like, and she can feel the energy in the room where everyone's like, come on, come on, come on. When do we get to drink the tea? And so she pauses and she says, do you know why we take so long to make the tea? And so, of course, we all wanted to know. We said, why? And she said, because of this. And she handed out a sheet of paper, which is one of the keys in the Bushido code, which is the one over here. And she says, what this says is Ichigo Ichie. And what Ichigo Ichie translates into in English is treasure every meeting, for it will never occur again. Those of you who have the most successful businesses in this room today, those of you who have the most successful businesses in 10 years' time, will not be the ones that are trying to do things fastest. It's those of you who actually take the time to slow down, to really think, what does the customer really want? To really think, what is it that my talent, my team, really care about? Because if you go 10 times more microscope, you end up going 10 times more telescope. You know, if you want to get 10 times bigger, go 10 times better. And that's what she was teaching us, is that just even the person you're sitting next to right now, the fact that they're here, they took the time to be here, they're sitting in that exact seat next to you, and you're sitting exactly where you are, and I'm saying exactly what I'm saying, this moment will never, ever happen again. So what I'm going to ask you all to do, just before I just jump into this, I'm going to ask you all to just take a moment, and what you're about to do is you're going to turn to the person next to you, you're going to introduce yourself. You might know them, they might be a total stranger. And here's what you're going to do. Before you do it, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you not to tell them what you're doing today. I'm going to ask you to be thinking about what were you doing 30 years ago. 30 years ago, think that 30 years ago was, that we're going all the way back to 1987, right? 1989. Take your age, minus 30, how young were you, right, at that age 30 years ago? If you're under 30, you do not need to do this exercise. So turn to the person next to you and just share with them, what were you doing 30 years ago? Go ahead. Okay, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Please give your partner a round of applause for sharing, first of all. Give your partner a round of applause for sharing. So I'm sure many of you are doing something very different 30 years ago. The reason I asked you that question is it wasn't just my 50th birthday. It was someone, or more like something's 30th birthday just 3 months ago. 3 months ago, the World Wide Web turned 30 years old. 30 years old. World Wide Web itself is a millennial. And if you actually look at this in terms of the numbers, they're astounding. If you were to go 30 years ago and be imagining what the world would look like 30 years later, you could not have predicted what is happening today. But what's most interesting isn't just how big the internet has got, is how different it is from what most people think. Because when you look at the internet today, it's quite easy to think that it's full of American companies, whether it's Amazon or Yahoo or Google, or whether it's like companies like Facebook, when the reality is that right now, there are only 8% of people using the internet that are even from America. That's a tiny number. In fact, humans make up less than 50% of the internet today in terms of all the traffic. And that's going to be down to 8% within the next 10 years. So we are seeing this massive growth in something which at the moment we cannot predict what's going to happen over the next 10 years. However, even though we can't predict it, what the Japanese have come up with is a concept called Society 5.0, where they believe that we have a job to do to grow our own consciousness, because what happens is every time there is a massive jump forward in technology, it takes a while for humans to jump up and connect with it, and for our own sociology to then catch up with it as well. So the reason they call it Society 5.0 is that they look and see that each of these different phases of technological growth that have happened. 1.0 was all about hunter-gatherer, which is at the end of it, meaning that we had to then show up as tribes and work together instead of just fighting each other. When we got to 2.0, which is about farming, that then actually led us to actually creating towns where the tribes weren't even moving anymore. And when we got to 3.0, was the Industrial Revolution. That was when we actually then shifted into cities, and then as a result of that, we were now sort of also in transient, and then that then led us to 4.0, which is the information age, and we're already realizing that cities itself does not do the job. That the fact that we are all connected to different countries, when the reality is all the biggest companies aren't focused at a country, they're focused globally, is allowing us to think very, very differently about the world that we need to move into. So really what they're saying is the time now is not for us to be just spending our time trying to grow technology, it's for us to think differently. And it's the entrepreneurs in the world that are the ones that are thinking most clearly. This here is something that they've done where they've actually linked and overlaid the United Nations global goals. There's 17 global goals that were set in 2015 for us to achieve by the year 2030. That includes things like the end to poverty, includes things like how do we actually ensure there's education for everyone, includes equality. And each of these were crowdsourced, whereas the Millennium Goals in the year 2000 were the governments themselves deciding what were the 8 biggest goals. This was crowdsourced, where there was millions around the world who said, this is what we think are the biggest challenges. And so we are on this journey right now that within 10 years, because from 2020 to 2030, we have the opportunity to achieve these, and the ones making the biggest difference are actually not the governments, they're not the large companies, they're actually the entrepreneurs that are coming together to make this happen. So this has already been picked up, this idea that we are going into an age where we're going to coexist with artificial intelligence, where sensors are going to give us real-time information physically, where the internet will become ethereal and a digital layer, which gives us new superpowers that we never had before. That from 4.0, the challenges we have from 4.0, which is the massive scaling that's happened, has resulted in cultures that we don't actually enjoy. There are companies like Facebook and Uber that have got a lot of success when it comes to their size, but has a lot of criticism when it comes to their culture. There are countries themselves which are at the moment building wars to try and hold in the things they don't understand or can't control. So we are living in a world of more discontent and disconnect today than ever before. And we either complain about it or we realize we're at the winter before a new spring. And that new spring is about how we think differently about Society 4.0 to 5.0 and how we can actually look at all those challenges we have and realize we already have the tools to solve it. It's just a matter of whether we do. So this is an article that came up in TechCrunch in February this year, which said Japan's Society 5.0 initiative is a roadmap for today's entrepreneurs. And this is this concept that if we decide to take these same ideas that we already have got the tools to be able to collaborate, to connect in very different ways, we realize that a lot of the things that we think are the ways to create success, the opposite is about to happen. And so, as well as being an entrepreneur, I'm a futurist. I spend time looking at the future and then advising large companies, as companies like Microsoft or companies like IBM in Europe, who are looking to say what's going to happen over the next 10 years. And we talk about the difference of 4.0 to 5.0. If you were to think about 4.0 being the information age, so we've gone from the industrial age to the information age, 5.0 is about the impact age. And the difference is dramatic. Like if you actually take the first one, mobile screen, everyone's complaining about screen time. No one's going to be complaining about screen time in 5 years' time because it's not about the screen time. It's about how the digital layer is enhancing our real-world experience. No one complains about screen time on Grab because it's not about you spending hours and hours on Grab. You're just using it enough to be able to then enhance your offline experience. So the biggest businesses, for sure, the reason Amazon buys over Whole Foods is they know the future is not going to be an online business. It's going to be how do you actually create a digital layer on an offline business, and that's the digital layer. Consultant to practitioner. You've seen all the way for the last 2 days, you don't want to go and hire someone who has a theory. You want to hire someone or have a mentor who's actually practicing what they're preaching. They've gone through the things that you need. Here in Southeast Asia, we have a challenge. The challenge is that we have normally 2 out of the 3 things you need to have a successful business. You have the founder, you have the funder, but what about the farmer? So whereas the founder is the one that starts the business, the funder is the one that resources it, the farmer is the one that grows it. And there aren't that many farmers who know how to build billion-dollar businesses here in Southeast Asia yet. In Silicon Valley, a lot of the funders happen to also know how to build the billion-dollar businesses because they've done it. So they can mentor the others. We're just starting that whole unique ecosystem here, but you have to come to an event like this to actually achieve it. And so how do we turn that into a day-to-day practice? That's a large part of how we need to look at the next 10 years. From high tech to high touch, where the fastest, most impactful businesses are not even the ones that are using technology, because we're all using technology, but it's actually how do we really make sure we're giving a transformational experience, which is why you would come to an event like this rather than just watch it on YouTube. And then you've also got the difference of a unicorn and a zebra. So what's the difference of a unicorn and a zebra? A unicorn is going to grow at any cost. And so it has to go out and feed itself voraciously with more capital. A zebra is something that's growing at the same pace, but profitably. The companies like Amazon and Apple, even though they're giant, still grow, but they're growing profitably because they're acquiring other companies and then adding a digital layer to it. So this idea of shifting the way we're thinking about even sustainability. I think there's a lot of people in this room who would agree that there is a high likelihood we're going to have a major disruption or we're going to have a major downturn in the coming years. What happens then when that takes place if all of the largest companies and our role models are so dependent on capital that they suddenly run out of the cash, not because they don't have a good business model, but just because the capital dries up? If you have got that ongoing flow that's taking place with a new model, like a zebra, which is much more sustainable. And by the way, a zebra is real, whereas a unicorn is mythical. A zebra does hang out with other zebras, whereas a unicorn tends to find itself where it is. And this doesn't mean for a moment that unicorns aren't a good thing and haven't helped give us a way forward. The main thing is just to realize that a lot of the most successful businesses we'll see in the future will not be ones that simply follow the unicorn model. And if you're beating yourself up because you don't have a unicorn right now, well, there could be a very, very different way that you could go about building sustainability, where it's not about how big you get, it's about how long you last. And so from these thoughts of how we can go about shifting and changing our thinking, let me just share with you that I myself as my practitioner, I'm going through the same growing pains that you're going through. One of my companies is called Entrepreneur Resorts. We decided to grow through the venture builder model, where we would actually be acquiring and building resorts around the world which are for entrepreneurs. We started in Bali. We have a beach club if you'd ever like to come visit us in Sanur Beach, which is all for co-working. We have accelerator programs at our resorts. We now have a safari resort. And we listed this company on the stock market. We had an IPO 2 years ago. And then we then also have our tech platform where we have just over 1 million entrepreneurs now in 20,000 cities around the world. And it's a digital layer where we're now acquiring other mentoring and training companies that we're giving them a digital layer as well. So as we're going through this whole process, we're thinking, how do we turn all of our solutions from what is currently a digital layer into augmented reality, into virtual reality, giving us a chance to connect online and then to actually be able to connect as well. And what do we do if we start thinking about the next 10 years as a plan where our whole purpose is not just to serve our customer, but is actually to serve society? It's possible to do good and do well at the same time. So how do we actually make that happen? That's the journey that we're on and that we're taking ourselves as well. So off the back of that thought, one of the things that I want to share is, why am I doing all of this? Why might you decide that your business in this next 10 years is going to leave a bigger impact than just the customers or investors that you serve? And that really comes back to my time when I was at university in Cambridge, and where I met someone who changed the course of my life. This man here, his name is Buckminster Fuller. And Buckminster Fuller was an architect. That's why we learned about him. He created the geodesic dome. But he also was a futurist. So he would think about things like, for example, the concept of us all being on a spaceship, that we are on spaceship Earth. He would think that our role here isn't just to be a human being, it's to be a crew of the spaceship, where we're actually making sure that the spaceship is looked after. And he said that we're in this final exam. He said this back in the 1980s. He said we're in a final exam because there is this massive growth happening in technology, there are global challenges, and there's already enough technology to solve the global challenges. He said all the biggest challenges are all distribution challenges. When we say that there's poverty, it isn't because there isn't enough money. There's plenty of money in the world. It's just not distributed effectively. When we say there's hunger, it isn't because there isn't enough food on the planet. There's plenty of food. It's just not distributed effectively. And already, way before the internet and mobile phones, we already had enough technology to solve all the world's problems. So he said, so why are they not solved? He said the reason they're not solved is not because of the technology, it's because of our human consciousness. He says our consciousness is just so busy looking after ourselves, we haven't even realized that we can solve all these problems. And he said, and this is an exam, because we have to catch up with that technology to harness it. And the good news is, we can. And if we do, we pass the exam. And we'll know we passed because we solved all the world's problems. We also know if we fail, because failing would be when technology continues to accelerate beyond our ability to catch up, and eventually it destroys us. This is the decade of AI. This is the decade of super high performance, not just computers, but robots. This is the time when we're moving towards a singularity. And during this time, we have to be more vigilant and aware than ever. But if we decide that every day when we show up, we're doing it for a bigger reason, well, then it's pretty interesting what can actually happen. I'm going to show you a quick video and then a final story, and then I'm going to be off the stage, and you're in for an amazing day today. This video is a video I didn't make. It's a video that was made by our partners, the United Nations. So we're partnering with them to bring entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship to all around the globe. This was a video with many familiar faces you will see, and it's what our goal is for the next 10 years. And I really do hope as many of you as possible come and join us and United Nations with your company to be able to make that difference as well. So this is a video all about us, the people.
We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done.
The global goals.
a 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
where no one
Wakes in the morning asking if there will be food today.
we will live in a world where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
Where everyone
goes to school, and education gives us the knowledge
and skills
For a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive.
and be powerful and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is handicapted.
We will live in a world
Where all people can get clean water.
and proper toilets
At home,
At school,
and at work.
we will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat,
light,
and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper.
And new wealth.
Leads to decent jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world
Where our industry,
Our infrastructure and our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
we will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
are defeated
Inside our countries,
and between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume.
Planet where we put back
What we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore
and protect
Life on land.
The forests.
animals,
The earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
to make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
If we take the whole thought that maybe your business isn't just a business for you to be able to really grow and serve your market, that maybe your business isn't just there to really make sure that your staff, your team are looked after, or that it's just there to give your investors a return, or you give the lifestyle that you want, but if it's there for something bigger. What if we were to collectively decide this next 10 years, it wasn't going to be the governments that were going to decide whether or not we're going to have the future we want, and it's not going to be the consumers either, it's going to be the entrepreneurs ourselves that have to take up that step. There is no question that in the next 10 years, education is going to transform, the healthcare is going to transform, fintech is going to transform, but the question is transform to what? And that's what we get to decide. I want to finish with a story because you might think, well, that's a good opportunity. I'm just going to kind of grow my business and I'll do something which is good for a cause as well. And all the different entrepreneurs that we work with, we start by saying, what's the purpose of why you're here? It's got to be something bigger, and then you attract the best talent, and then you attract the best customers. So what is that bigger thing? And I want to just share with you how if you look at it as an opportunity, that might already be the wrong way. When I was at this bonsai garden that I mentioned earlier, and we were there at the tea ceremony. We came out after the tea ceremony. It was a bright, sunny day. As you can see here, we were looking at one of the amazing bonsai trees, and there was a gardener, or who we thought was a gardener, who was there gardening the tree. And so we went up to him. He's like 75 years old. And we said, hey, have you been a gardener here for long? He says, oh, I've been here for like 20 years doing this. We go, wow, well, how long have you been working, like each day? How long? Oh, I start at 6 in the morning. I go to 8 at night, 14 hours a day. I said, wow, you must enjoy your weekends. No, I work during the weekends as well. It's like, whoa, you're 7 days a week. You must have a really terrible boss. He goes, no, I am the boss. You're the boss. He goes, yeah, this is my bonsai garden. We said, but these are expensive, aren't they? He goes, yeah, the whole bonsai garden is like, what, $50 million here. We're like, oh, how did you make your money? He's like, oh, I had a noodle company. He made ramen noodles. He was a ramen noodle multimillionaire, and he decided to put all his money into these bonsai trees. So he's there every day doing this. We said, well, why would you spend all this time yourself doing this? And he pointed out this tree, this one right here. He said, do you realize this tree is over 1,000 years old? That means the person who planted it 1,000 years ago, that person knew he would never see the tree today. The tree would outlive him. And so then he had his children, and his children had children. And this went on generation after generation for 1,000 years. That's 15 generations. And every generation looked after this tree. And then they passed it to me. And this tree is not going to die while we're here. This tree will keep living for another 1,000 years, which means there's going to be another generation and then another generation. Not just my children, not just my grandchildren, my great-great-great-great-grandchildren will look after this tree for another 15 generations. He says, so when I'm looking after this tree, I'm not looking after this tree for me or for today. I'm looking after this tree for all those generations. And if I don't look after this tree, I don't just let down myself, I let down all of those generations. So this is not an opportunity, a maybe I look after the tree. This is an obligation. I must look after this tree. That inspired us so much. Every one of us that night were thinking about what is our must. Like, what is it that we must do, because the actual ramifications or cost of not doing it is far too great. And if that then drives you to then show up every day, your success only becomes your success, not when it's an opportunity, but when it's an obligation, when it turns from a maybe to a must. And so I'm going to leave you with that thought as we get to the end of today, with a final thought as well, which maybe everything we're talking about here is not about Society 5.0, it's not shaping even Entrepreneur 5.0, it's actually creating humanity 5.0. Thank you very much.